being part of a movement when it's not so popular. It's bringing information when it's not so comprehensible in this field. I can talk, the unique part about me, I can talk from a victim perspective, but that's not my objective today. My objective today is to talk to you about support and what that looks like. So, support is a choice, but education is key in that support. And right now, I'm going to give you 3 words, and I want you to evaluate what goes on in your mind, what goes on in your body, and how you react. Postpartum, PTSD, ADD. What's your reaction? We all know those words. Now I'm going to give you 3 different words, and I want you to perform the same thought process, the same reactions. I want you to evaluate it. Bipolar with psychotic features. Schizophrenia. Multiple personality disorder. Did you react different? I bet you did. Did your heart sink a little bit? Because mine did before I was educated. All of those that I read you are all mental illnesses. And believe it or not, there are hundreds of mental illnesses out there. But right now and today, I'm going to talk to you about support. What does it mean? What does it look like? And where do you start? I have firsthand experience, as all of you know. My husband is diagnosed bipolar. And I've had the pleasure to walk through this journey with him. But I'm going to talk about 4 key points today and how that helped me in supporting him. And I think it can help people when they have people who are, whether it's your coworker, your loved one, your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, whoever it is. But the 4 key points are identify, accept, action, and recovery. So the first absolutely important thing is to identify what that mental illness is. Identify, so you've been given a diagnosis, or maybe you haven't been given a diagnosis. What is that illness? Ensure it's not a misdiagnosis, because according to multiple sources, including NAMI, which for those who are not aware what NAMI is, it's National Alliance on Illness of Mental Illness, 69% of mental illnesses are misdiagnosed. That's huge. And of that 69%, 1/3 continue to be misdiagnosed for 10 years. So there's a difference between misdiagnose and misdiagnose, which I have firsthand experience in understanding the difference between misdiagnose and misdiagnose. A misdiagnose describes a situation where your doctor tells you something or diagnoses you with a condition that is not really the situation. For example, you go into the doctor, you're not feeling well, he diagnoses you with the flu, but it turns out you have Lyme disease. That's a misdiagnosis. A misdiagnose actually describes a diagnosis or a lack of diagnosis, usually leading to no or inaccurate treatment. So for example, a woman who goes into the doctor and she has a small lump in her breast and she's told it's benign and it's actually malignant. Or an all too common misdiagnosed, believe it or not, is when women have stomach problems and they go in and they're told to see their gastroenterologist, when in fact they have ovarian cancer and need to see their gynecologist. So getting a correct mental health diagnosis can take a few tries. And it's sad, but it is the absolute truth. And I have that truth and that experience because for most of you, maybe you do know and maybe you don't know, but part of my journey with Trent, we sought help for 3 years from the same medical doctor. I'm not blaming him. I'm not angry at him. But the fact is for 3 years we were misdiagnosed. So after I received the proper diagnosis, you have to identify, then you have to educate, right? You have to educate yourself on the illness. And I tell people all the time when I talk to people and when I mentor people, go with your gut, right? Because I'm telling you, about 6 months before Trent had his episode, I had a gut feeling he was bipolar. And I didn't know anything about it. So go with your gut. And I always tell my OB, who I've delivered 4 of my babies, and he always says to me, Shannon, you micromanage your health care. And I say, because I have to. I have to micromanage my health care. I have learned I can't depend on just the information given to me. Right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. If it doesn't feel right, it's usually not right. So when Trent was first diagnosed, and properly diagnosed, let me insert that, I remember getting his diagnosis. I remember exactly where I was. We all have those moments, right? When those aha, life-changing moments. And I remember sitting in my office and sitting in front of my computer, and I Googled bipolar type 2 because that's his diagnosis. And immediately came on the screen, top 5 symptoms of bipolar. And I went, oh my gosh, that's my husband, right? The top 5. And I immediately identified that this was the correct diagnosis, that we are on the right path. Which brings me into my next point of accept. So now I have his diagnosis. We as a family have his diagnosis. What does that look like? Right? So I've now he's received a proper diagnosis from a professional psychiatrist and medical doctor. And I had to move into acceptance. Accepting that this is my new normal, accepting the diagnosis, and accepting my role. And with that acceptance, so after I got the diagnosis, I was immediately relieved. Anybody been there? You get some news and you're like, oh, finally got the right answer. I could finally identify the behaviors, the signs, the symptoms, that this was all making sense. It all came together. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't losing it. But after the relief, I experienced fear. Fear of what people were going to think. How was I going to explain this? How would we be labeled? What were they going to think of my children? There's such bad stigma surrounding mental health and mental illness. And how was I going to overcome and face that? Which brings me to my next point of action. I had to take action. And in order to take action and overcome that fear, I had to face it. I have a saying, and I use it in a lot of things I do. The only way out is through. There's no easy way out. You just got to go through it. So it's not only required of the individual, it's required of the people supporting. Another one of my Shannonisms, that's what I call them, is actions speak so loud I can't hear you. So therefore, act, walk it out. But how do we walk it out? Right? How do we walk this out in such an area that is so misunderstood? Education, education, education. Like anything, the more you educate, the more you'll feel comfortable, the better you'll be able to talk, and the better you'll be able to be. So education on the symptoms and the warning signs. So I'm going to give you two definitions. Symptoms are things that a person experiences and can talk about, but they can't directly be observed by others. So I'm going to say that again. So symptoms are things that people or a person experiences that they can talk about, but they can't directly be observed by others. Warning signs. Warning signs are things that can be seen by others. So there's a difference. And remember, a lot of times people will say, how did you not know he was bipolar? How did you not know? How did you not see it? How did you go from here to here? Well, signs of a mental illness don't suddenly just appear. They don't just show up. They sometimes come in subtle and some not so subtle ways. And it morphs and morphs and morphs, especially if you're uneducated. Each illness has its own signs and symptoms, but common signs, so signs are, remember, things that can be seen by others. And symptoms are things that can't be seen directly by others. So each illness has its own signs. So if I were to go over that, we'd be here all day. And I'm sure you don't want that. But some common symptoms of mental illness can be excessive worrying or fear, feeling excessively sad or low, confused thinking, extreme mood changes, avoiding friends and social activities, change in sleeping habits, difficulties in eating habits, increased hunger or lack of appetite, changes in sex drive, difficulty perceiving reality, substance abuse. The list goes on and on, right? But you get the point. The other thing that is absolutely key to educate yourself if you are experiencing this is on runways. Does anybody know what a runway is?
Yeah.
No. Besides the red carpet. And how it applies to mental illness. So a runway is the point in time from when an individual first experiences or exhibits early warning signs to the time that they have a full-blown episode or a breakdown. It could be one day, it could be 1 month, and it could be 10 years. So your runway is really individualistic. It's very specific to the person. And warning signs are, I'm going to get you to know this by the time you leave here, things that can be seen by others. The other major thing to educate yourself on is local hospitals, facilities, crisis centers. There are a ton of resources out there. There's some here in Castle Rock. There's a 24/7 crisis center right off Santa Fe and C470. That you can take, anybody can go there, you can walk in, you can say, I think I'm having a mental breakdown, I'm experiencing signs and symptoms. They will evaluate you. They have psychologists, psychiatrists on hand. They have beds to stay overnight if you need to. You can take friends there. I personally have taken friends there. And the other thing to educate yourself on is in education involvement regarding society that face mental illness. Get involved in support groups. Surround yourself around people who have walked the path before you. You're not alone. You're not alone. And this, when you're going through it or when you're involved in it, you can feel so isolated. But you're not. And the one thing that is so near and dear to my heart that I absolutely am such an advocate for is counseling. We personally sought counseling, individually and collectively, Trent and I. Not just because of our story and the experience that we went through, but also because of the things I mentioned. How do I cope with this? How do I deal with this? I have children now. Are they going to inherit this? How do I see this? And all these things. Is it going to have an episode again? What do I look out for? So we did this not only because often, not always, but often, a person who's been diagnosed with a mental illness has exhibited behaviors that were destructive, hurtful, and chaotic. So I sought help to be the best wife that I could do and to support Trent. So I'll give you an example. I'm an avid, I love to read. I really do. I have 4 kids, and if I don't fall asleep before I read, but I love to read. So I read a lot of things on my phone, and parenting is one of them. I have 4 kids. We have 4 kids. 10, 6, 3, and 10 months, right? I have forever babies, and we are in constant different stages all the time. And I'm thinking all the time, how can I be the best mom? Am I doing this right? Am I doing that wrong? Am I doing this? How do I handle this? You know, my 10-year-old thinks she knows it all. My 10-month-old's teething. Is she okay, right? So we constantly are reading blogs, articles, information, and educating ourselves and talking to girlfriends, turning to social media on parenting. Or whatever it may be in your life. Maybe it's your job, or maybe it's you've got hobbies. So why wouldn't we do it in something that means so much to us? So I know I did, and I continue to do this, is seek out information as well as counseling. I needed to process. I needed to heal. I needed to restore and advocate for my family. And that's a big reason why I did counseling, and still do to this day. I still go to counseling to this day. And the other big thing I did is I took my children. I involved my children in counseling immediately. At the time, when we went through our situation, I had one son, he was 3.5, and I was pregnant with the other one. So I immediately got our 3.5-year-old involved in counseling, and he spent 2 years in counseling. Not just dealing with the traumatic incident, yes. However, we also needed to know what this looked like, how our lives had been chaotic due to some of the behaviors for the last several years, right? And like it or not, mental illness is genetic. So I needed to understand my son. Understand, is he exhibiting behaviors? What am I looking out for on my kids? So there's a story. I'm going to give you a quick story. And I can talk. For those of you who know me, I can really talk. So I have to watch myself. I have my own timer going on over here. But I'll give you a quick story that when all of this had transpired and Trent had been diagnosed and I had told some of our friends, and one of my best friends at the time, we were sitting on my porch, my front porch, and she said to me, "So how are you going to make sure Trent takes his medication?" And I said, "I'm not." The look on her face was probably like just like you, Heidi. Very flabbergasted, like, "What do you mean you're not going to do it?" And through my counseling, through my education, I learned that I can't make Trent do anything. Trent had to want to take his medication. Trent had to want to get better. Trent had to want to make these changes because Trent wanted to get better. Not because Shannon was making him. What good is it going to do me to stand over him? "Did you take your medication? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you take it today?" I could be a nagging wife. I'm really good at that too. But ultimately, I can't process this for you. Walk through it. Educate. Do what we can. Which brings me into recovery. Recovery is forward progress, right? It's moving into living a whole, healthy life. And one of the things that I learned from this experience is I have to be transparent with people. Transparency is absolutely imperative in my life today. And I have to be transparent. We have to be transparent together, Trent and I. And as my husband always says, and I say it all the time to people, shame takes away your courage to deal with reality. Shame takes away your courage to deal with reality. So I had to quit being ashamed. Ashamed that I had a husband who was diagnosed bipolar, that we were walking through this together. And we developed a treatment plan together. If you've never heard of it, it's a great tool. A treatment plan looks different to everybody. But what we did is we sat down, we talked about his medication, we talked about consequences. If he's not going to take the medication, what are Trent's consequences? He can make that choice. It doesn't mean I'm going to stick around, but he can certainly make that choice. We did diary cards. A diary card is kind of like a journal, but logs your emotions. Emotional regulation, as they call it. We did counseling, as I mentioned. We developed a support team, medical and non-medical. I'll talk about the support team in a second. We made amends. Trent worked very hard to go back into people's lives and make it right where he had wronged them. And it wasn't comfortable. Some accepted it and some didn't. But it was part of our treatment plan so we could get forward progress. We incorporated exercise. We used to have a dog. We'll have another dog soon. But hopefully. We developed boundaries. Boundaries were huge. Not just within our marriage. I developed very strict boundaries in my marriage, Trent will tell you, for the first year and a half. But we also developed boundaries outside of our marriage, right? And I will tell you, when you develop boundaries, And you're walking through, because often somebody who's supporting and in this role, your trust has been betrayed. Somewhere along the way, you've gotten hurt, your trust has been betrayed. Therefore, and maybe you haven't had your trust betrayed. Maybe you're just developing boundaries about what this looks like. Maybe you're coming into the marriage and this is the way that somebody's been diagnosed, and you didn't experience any of the old person, right? But what are some boundaries? What do they look like? So one of my things with boundaries is I had to be very clear what my boundaries were. I couldn't make Trent pay a price forever, right? I had to set a time frame on when my boundaries, when my stigma or my needs had been done being met, right? That he can't pay a price forever. So our time frame was 1.5 years. I'll be very transparent. I wouldn't even allow him to have a Facebook account. He couldn't have access to a voicemail. I had access to all of his voicemail. He couldn't have his own email account. Those were some of my boundaries, right? But they helped me walk in through recovery. We developed a support team. A support team, we sat down with people who we really trusted and loved and explained Trent's illness and said, hey, this is Trent. This is what he's dealing with. This is what he's been diagnosed. These are some of his symptoms and signs. And now I need you as my support team to help me. Because to be honest, in the midst of it, right, I may get lost and I may not be able to see them as clear when I'm in the midst of it. But those that are on the outside can be like, I think Shannon said Trent was this way. I may want to talk to her about that. It's just accountability, right? And another set of people looking at it and saying, are you all right? Is he okay? Everything going okay? And it's not to dangle anything over his head. It's simply because we're all moving towards the same goal of a whole healthy life. So we keep open communication. There's no running and hiding in our family. You're able to identify your loved one's early, middle, and late warning signs. Some of Trent's early warning signs are irritable, defensive, blameless, little to no sleep, withdrawn. And I'm not talking about how he's had a bad day, he's irritable. A strong sense of irritability that doesn't go away. Strong sense of blame. There's a difference. There's balance. His middle signs are short with patience, trouble focusing, negative. And some of the late warning signs, when I say late, it means we are on the verge of a episode or a breakdown. He's reckless, paranoia, hallucinations, and not taking medication or substance abuse. So, do you go from early to late immediately? Absolutely not. Remember, everybody has their own specific runway, right? So you have tools and techniques that help you get through them. Now, Trent learned these, and I took them and applied them for my own life. And some of my favorite ones are my least favorite, and now it's my favorite. Because what that means is, Trent, we will just, I know you all love Trent, and you think he's great, and he is. He is wonderful, but sometimes he pisses me off. Yes. And I am Irish, German, and Spanish. So I have just a little bit of temper in me. So I can go from 0 to 100 pretty darn quick. And he would say to me, come on, give me a hug. I don't want to hug you. I don't want to hug you. Opposite emotion, Shannon. I don't want to hug you, right? But I would do it. I would do the action. Opposite emotion. I'd give him a hug. I'd do the opposite emotion of what I was feeling. I really wanted to strangle him, but instead I hugged him, right? So, and there is something about it that actually works. I can't explain it. I don't know, but it's the truth. The other one that is absolutely my second, or if not, probably tight running first, is claim your emotions. What, again, just like it says. We do it with our kids. I do not, in our house, in the Orendorf house, you are not allowed to just say, I'm mad, I'm angry. Okay, why? What are you feeling? Because there's scientific proven fact, there's the amygdala that sits in the back of your brain that holds your emotions. And when you state that emotion, it releases from your brain and it releases from your body. So my children are not allowed to just scream, stop! Although they do. We have to say, why? What are you feeling? Are you feeling upset? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel whatever it is, right?